Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another Astral interview. And here with me, I have Mathew. Welcome, Mathew. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Rose. It's great to be with you.
It's wonderful. So before we go any further, why don't I get you to tell everyone a little bit about yourself, your past, your life a little bit before we go into what you do now.
Yeah, absolutely. So my whole endeavor here with Phoenix Rising United is the idea of being reborn from the ashes and rising above the ashes of our past challenges. And the core inspiration for that endeavor was my fiance's passing from terminal cancer last year in April of 2020. About a 1.5 year long journey with her, beginning with breast cancer and then going through the caregiving process, and eventually it transformed into terminal cancer. And that was quite a surreal experience. And it had happened just prior to the COVID lockdown when she was admitted to the hospital. So that on top of it was an additional unforeseen circumstance. And so it was really my journey with her along that 1.5 years, as well as in her final days, that really sparked me into a new level of awareness of the spiritual realm. And that's really, the core focus. I mean, I had a lot of challenges in my past as a youth, as a young man in my late teens and 20s, had close encounters with the police, got involved with the wrong crowd, drinking, smoking, and using cannabis and all that sort of thing. And in September 2010, my first wake-up call over 10 years ago now was being pulled over for speeding, and I'd been drinking, and that escalated to the police officer actually assaulting me on the side of the freeway when I was pulled over. So that was like a literal wake-up call. Got punched in the face several times. So that was when I already at that point in my life, Shiros, I knew that I wasn't doing the right things, but I didn't necessarily know what the right things were. But when that happened, I now had the opportunity to figure out what the right things were.
And that made you basically realize that, I wouldn't be in this situation unless if somehow I've contributed to it.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
So and that's where it really started for me. And it took about 1.5 years or so to turn my perceptions of life around. And I got into personal development, and in 20.
So tell me, when you say turn your perceptions of your life around, what does that look like?
Well, I think first and foremost, like not feeling like I'm a victim of life, right? And to a degree, I always felt like I was at conflict or battling other people, battling myself. And I was using alcohol and cannabis and cigarettes to cope with that, as well as unhealthy personal relationships. So I just realized, hey, that's not working for me anymore. And when I got into personal development, it was a step in the right direction. A lot of the stuff in that industry is pretty fluffy and fantasy based, but it still was better than what I was doing. And then I got involved in my first mastermind group in the summer of 2012. I think by the fall of 2012, I joined the first mastermind group. And then by 2014, I began my first year-long coaching apprenticeship, and just found I had a natural talent for facilitating and coaching and mentoring and guiding people. And so I've just endeavored to make that my main business for
your main focus,
for the last 6 or 7 years. And it's been the last 1.5 years now where it's become a full-time endeavor for me.
So tell me about your time with your wife. Tell me a little bit about that, and tell me what you discovered in that interaction.
Well, we were together for 5 years. So I met Gail in March of 2015. And she was almost 19 years older than me at the time. Although you would have never known it, she had the exuberant energy of someone in their mid-30s or younger. And her biggest thing, she taught me definitely many lessons, but one of the biggest ones is she talked about that there's two kinds of people in the world. There's gallon people and pint people. And gallon and pint in terms of their capacity to give love and receive love. And Gail's definitely a gallon person. And I am too, absolutely. However, with my life circumstances and my upbringing, I had a lot of suppression in my life. So I never really had the opportunity to express that love.
Right.
So in being with Gail, I had that opportunity and grew into it more and more as the relationship evolved. And so that was one of the biggest takeaways from it, is learning about that emotional vulnerability,
Right.
um, and that it's a strength. It's obviously done in an appropriate way, expressed appropriately, but that was one of the main things. And she really helped me grow into being the man that I now am.
Hmm.
And if it weren't for that relationship, it was really an accelerator to me stepping into my greatness and my full potential as a human being and as a coach.
Right. Wow. And so then, well, this idea of the two types of persons in the world, I mean, talk a little bit about that. What did you consider yourself as then?
Well, I mean, I always felt that inner self expression, but there was always this weight on it. It just wasn't accepted, mostly from my dad's side, because they're very non emotional
Right.
and very more intellectual. And, things need to be in a certain order and look a certain
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And my parents divorced when I was 3. So I grew up between my mom, who I live with full time, and I visit my dad every couple weekends. And so that was
Right.
very challenging too, because they didn't communicate with one another at all,
Right.
really.
Right.
And so that made it very challenging for me, because I was like split between 2 households, and my mom didn't have enough strength within herself to say like, hey, this isn't healthy for my son.
Right.
And my dad just, he didn't know what he didn't know, and he was very career focused and just had a totally different viewpoint on life. So it was a total split in my consciousness, literally. And,
Hmm.
I'm a Gemini too. So, I got to experience that in a literal fashion. And so in my mom's environment, there was definitely a level of nurturing and care, but there's also a high level of stress and even volatility from her at times. And then on my dad's side, there was definitely a sense of balance, but there was no real emotion in it. So I didn't have the ability to express any of that love and nurturing and compassion that I knew was in myself. So I would say that I grew up as a pint person in a sense. Not that's not completely accurate, but there was levels of suppression would definitely be the more accurate way to say it. But it's with Gail that I recognized, hey, I am a gallon person, and now I have an opportunity to express that. So I don't know if it's actually possible to transform from a pint person into a gallon person. I think the ones that recognize that they're gallon people are just have had a high level of suppression. And then at some point in their lives, they have the opportunity to express it more.
Okay. So when we say express, what exactly they're expressing? More love?
I think love is like one way to define it. Vulnerability is another excellent word, but fundamentally it's just that heart energy that you can feel, that
Yeah.
openness that you can feel within yourself, right? A lot of
Right.
people are closed, and you can
Right.
feel that, right? Like people like you and I
Right.
that are more intuitive in that respect, we
Right.
can feel
Right.
when someone's closed off. And you
Yes.
can
Yes.
be like, hey, they're either a pint person or I guess, this is interesting too, because as you're asking me the questions, I'm getting the downloads. And it's not even that anyone's actually a pint person. It's just that level of suppression kind of is a symptom or a cause of the idea
It
that now they can't express
creates
it.
that reality in
Yeah,
their
exactly.
dynamic, I guess.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So where are you at with it now? What do you do now? Um, what do you do differently as a coach in your coaching that would put you apart from other coaches?
Well, I think, the idea of transformation is paramount, and not
Mhm.
everyone's ready for transformation, and they can only really get as much as they're ready to receive, just like the gallon and pint analogy. But I've had the privilege of creating an environment just through my own self-awareness and connection to source power that I'm able to bring in a lot of that transformational energy. So, there's different types of coaches and speakers. Some are more about education or
Mhm.
information, some are more about motivation, some are more about inspiration.
Right.
But from my standpoint, like transformation is the only point. And everything's an aspect of transformation. It's just to
Mhm.
what degree are you experiencing it? Because
Right.
if we look at humanity's evolution, it's all about transformation. That's the whole point of living on this
Mhm.
planet, is to be a transformer, transforming darkness into light. I've
Right.
just done it at a very great level of depth for myself. And because of that, I'm able to much easier facilitate that for others. So I would say that's the unique thing. It's very authentic. It's not commercialized, and it really is about the soul's evolution. And I can see how all that functions. So the ego is very much absent in what I do, because I can just see where its place needs to be and where its place doesn't need to be, and everything can maintain the sort of order that's necessary for people to truly evolve in the way that's best for them.
So the year-long coaching you did, who did you do it with, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I just did it with a local gentleman here in the Toronto, Canada area, and he's quite eccentric. I don't associate with him at all now, because I
Right.
just outgrew him. But I was just grasping at any straw to move forward, and that's really been my
Right.
whole life.
Yeah.
So I haven't, that idea of like turning lemons into lemonade. That's been my entire life, right? I've been
Right.
given a lot of lead, and then given the opportunity to weave it into gold.
Right.
So
Correct.
I don't like. I appreciate many mentors from the past, but I definitely don't have any recommendation for them, because they were just stepping stones for where I'm at now.
Mm-hmm.
And now, fortunately, like, I obviously align with people that are like totally in alignment with what I feel is the ultimate truth of things. But yeah, that was, and it was more involved in brain training and brain optimization when I got started.
Okay.
So
So
much
tell me
here.
a little bit about brain training and brain optimization, how you bring it into your coaching.
Well, I use a process called gamma breathing, which is one of the things I learned, when I first got started, even before. And the idea of the gamma brainwave state is when the brain becomes most malleable for transformation and change.
Mm-hmm.
So most people are spending their day in this beta brainwave state, where it's kind of like a rat race mode, and their thinking is actually ahead of their actions. And I find that's typically why people get stressed, is because they see that what they want to get done, but their body's not capable of getting it done as quickly as their mind is perceiving it. And so
Right.
it's like putting the cart before the horse. And at some point, your energy gets drained because you're not in alignment with your body. So what the gamma state basically does is it turns off your thinking. So you're no longer thinking about what you need to get done. And now you're just in the flow of what needs to be done, truly what
Right.
needs to be done, from a place of
Right.
balance. And it's much easier to come into alignment with what reality is truly is, versus what people want it to be or think it should be.
Right. And so then, um, when you discuss this brainwave activity, do you bring this into your coaching too?
Oh yeah,
Can
that's the
you,
key process that I utilize, is the gamma breathing.
can you
Because
describe it?
well, yeah, it's a breathing cycle process, and it takes. I mean, we can do it together here if you'd like, just to
Sure,
explain.
let's do that.
Yeah. So typically, the way it works is with getting into alignment first and foremost. So we'll just do that so the viewers can get a sense of that. So
Sure.
the breath cycle itself takes about 40 to 50 seconds. Each breath is about 3 seconds in length, with a brief pause of 1 second at the top and bottom of every breath. And we do it with our eyes closed. And I'll just do it as kind of a guided meditation type
Okay.
of experience.
Sure.
So go ahead and close your eyes,
Yeah.
and just think about what alignment means to you, just your own definition. There's no right or wrong. Just get a picture of that. And
Mm-hmm.
in general, focus on your heart area. The heart's the first organ to develop in the body upon conception. So just focus on the heart, that first point of connection to source power. And then we'll breathe together here as we activate that heart vibrational alignment deeper and further than ever before. And begin by breathing with me. Breathe all the way in through your mouth, filling your lungs. And breathe mouth out for 3 seconds. And mouth in 3 seconds. And mouth out. Nose in. Nose out. Nose in. Nose out. Mouth in. Mouth out. Mouth in. And hold your breath for a moment. Just feel that sense of alignment. Notice any subtle shifts in your brain or body, any tingling sensations, any sense of energization in your experience. Just keep your eyes closed for another moment, allowing yourself to breathe normal. Just have an appreciation for that alignment, that appreciation for this moment, an appreciation for who you are as a human being and your ability to give love and your ability to receive love and your ability to have compassion for yourself and for all humanity. Just allow that to become your more normalized, stabilized state of being. And then open your eyes when you're ready.
Cool.
Yeah, so you may notice that, your perception is slightly different. Things might be a little brighter, more energized, have more enthusiasm for life.
Yeah.
And so we basically do that in the work, and it's mostly group setting based now, because when we're doing that with several people, I'll generally right now have about 12 to 16 people per class, and I'm aiming to grow that up to 30 or 40 and even up to 300 or 400 by the end of the year.
So
And
so it's group sessions you do
that's
then.
correct, yeah.
Okay. And so they're not one-on-one, they're group sessions. They're more like guided meditations then?
Yeah, it's essentially that process we went through. It's just done in more elongated and in a deeper fashion. But imagine doing that over the course of an hour or two, or a full day
Yeah,
workshop. You're going
absolutely.
to be in a different state of being.
Well, tell us about your workshop. What kind of information does someone get in a workshop that they would do with you?
Yeah, so the workshop's called Ignite Your Passion and Rise from the Ashes, and it's a 2-day workshop experience, 2 full days, about 6 hours per day. And it really goes through the different levels of consciousness in terms of how our reality actually functions. And that's one of the key challenges for people, is we have a lot of perceptions about how reality works versus how does it actually work, and how do we maintain that balance. So
Right.
where the two basic outcomes of the workshop are, number one, having a deeper trust with ourselves, because people have doubts about, hey, is this stuff real, is my intuition real, is it guiding me right? So just trusting yourself more,
Right.
and then being more honest with yourself, because that's really the key challenge for people, is we have these stories that we've been telling ourselves for decades,
Yeah.
sometimes millennia, if it's been in our karma or our genetics or whatever. And the stories make sense in the sense that, like, they're constructed very carefully, very intricately, but that doesn't mean they're true. So as
Right.
we unravel and disassemble those stories that are no longer serving us, then we can have that level of self-honesty, and then from there we can realize how we're actually creating everything in our reality, and everything in our environment is coming from us. We're not a victim at all.
No.
But you can't just hear that, right? Because there's a lot of resistance. You have to experience it. So the
Right.
goal of the workshop is really to bring people into that experience, to know that they're actually creating all of this themselves, and feel that sense of connection to everything around them.
Right. So tell us about your connection. When did it start, and what was your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to that gallon and pint analogy, is like, I've always been connected, just as I've always been a gallon person. But again, through the suppression that I grew up with, I denied it a lot. I think when I was really young, I was just more tuned into it. But then as I got in my teens, suppressed it more and more. And then once you
Right.
incorporate substances of any kind, whether it's allopathic medicine or whatever, it all suppresses to some degree.
Right.
So that was a challenge. I used different like Tylenol and things like that too. Quite heavily. I worked out a lot in my youth, so I take all these supplements, and all these things, cause a level of suppression in our system to,
Right.
receive the intuition. But once I started, having that turnaround after I was assaulted by the police officer, and had my turnaround into the mastermind groups and that, um, I started to like really tune into that intuition more and follow that inner guidance system. And then it was really with Gail that it became more active than ever. And then with her passing last year in April, that's really when it ignited. And she actually came to me in spirit the morning before she passed. And
Right.
so I've had an open dialogue with her and
Wow.
the spiritual beings, other deceased family members and such.
So so do you think your state initiated that interaction with her, or was it she sort of entered your energy field and and ignited that for you?
Well, that was one of the biggest realizations actually after she passed, is to realize that it's all my movie. It's all coming from me. So she was my manifestation, right? And everything that we experience in our lives is a manifestation of the Holy Spirit, if you want to put it that way. And what I mean by
Mhm.
that is the Holy Spirit is this wholeness, the spirit of wholeness and oneness. And that's, we're always comforted by that. We're always living inside that. It's just we're not necessarily aware of it, but everything that is presented to us in our lives is coming from this Holy Spirit as a gift for our growth. It's just humanity's
Right.
challenges. They don't receive it as a gift and
Right.
they receive it as a curse in a lot of cases. But when I recognized, hey, everything is my creation and here to serve a positive purpose, I realized, wow, I manifested Gail, and Gail's passing was something that I needed for my growth. And now I have this communication with her through the spiritual realm. The relationship didn't end; it just took on a different form. And in fact, it's what we needed to evolve the relationship. As funny as that sounds for a lot of people,
Right.
um, and so everything really is working out perfectly. And that became the biggest realization in this experience that I had after she passed.
So tell me about your relationship now versus then.
Well, there's no ego involved in it, right? Because that was the critical component. I mean, couples have their
Yeah.
communication challenges or whatever. Plus, we had that 19-year difference in our viewpoints
Yeah.
of life. So there were a lot of constraints there in terms of like how finance should work, how business should work, how things should work in that type of regard. So all that's gone.
Right.
But the like unconditional, unending love that was always there and was always expressed to one degree or another is now fully expressed.
Right.
And so like even in communicating it right now, like I can feel that more, right? Because I'm more present to it. I can feel it through my
Mhm.
back as well as my heart. The whole heart chakras just opened up.
Right.
And so that's always there, right? And like her love's just there, and she, and in the spirit, like they can do anything that they need to do for your growth.
Right.
So if you're wondering why things aren't happening the way you want them to don't want them to happen, is because you don't need them to happen that way. Because if they needed to, these guys can make it happen.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So that's the other thing, is like, if the circumstances aren't going as fast as you want them to, it's because they don't need to be. So having that direct communication with them and understanding that makes it a lot easier to go
Yeah.
through the motions of life. So that's another, huge component of the
Right.
communication.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you've communicated with others, you said, as well since then?
Yeah, well, it's kind of ironic. Shortly after Gail passed, I was speaking with my grandmother, who's alive, and my grandfather had passed away in January of last year, 2020, and my grandmother wanted to, kind of console me or whatever with Gail's passing, but it was ironic because as she started talking, my grandfather started talking to me.
Oh, wow.
And so that was, and so I like have that, he's not as active, but it's interesting, like in this dialogue, because there's more energy there, like I can clearly see his presence and I can see
Mhm.
his, opportunity where he likes to, have a little bit of input and just share like what he's doing and such. um he just like pops in. He's not I wouldn't call him a guide necessarily, but he just kind of pops in to give a glimpse of what he's up to and that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, I've had other clients too where people have passed, and then um, I just can feel their energy, and sometimes I can get quite distinct visuals on what they looked like or what they're doing, and it's definitely the emotions is the most that I feel, but often too I can get the visual imagery as well, and a sense of their personality and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's amazing. So when you're with a client, do you interact with their loved ones in past? Uh,
As needed, right? I don't advertise that necessarily,
right,
but if it comes up, then it
right.
comes up, and it's obviously relevant for the
Hmm.
conversation, so I express it.
Right. So you'll allow whatever it is that's needed to work through with a client then.
Absolutely.
Right. So tell us about some of the tools you use in your working with clients. You mentioned one, the breathing. Is there other tools?
Well, it's that imagination that connects us to source power. And the challenge, I think, again, with human nature is we downplay imagination. We think it's not real. But what I've learned is it's actually our imagination that's more real than anything because our entire experience externally is coming from our imagination. Even if you think about it, if you look at everything around you, it came from someone's imagination, the laptop, the webcam, the chair, the clothes, the paint, the walls, the house, the windows, it all came from someone's mind. So, the idea is everything is in our imagination, coming from our imagination. So I've just learned
Right.
to make that the source of creation. And so that's the key focus of the workshop and my classes. And we just use predominantly the gamma breathing to get people there, a lot of guided visual imagery. And we also do quite a bit of role playing, particularly in the workshop, where people really get to step into being who they prefer to be because it's a safe space for them to practice. And it's just like an actor learning their lines before they get filmed for the final production of the movie, right? Like you got to
Right.
practice who you prefer to be before people are going to take you seriously. Otherwise, you're not taking yourself seriously.
Right. So tell me some success stories with clients that you've had.
Well, I've had, a lot of success in terms of like the healing side of things. I've had one gentleman who was able to dissolve back pain and get off medication, as well as avoid having surgery, needing to have hip surgery. I had one gentleman disappear psoriatic arthritis. I've had people be able to connect with their loved ones that have passed, connect with avatars like Jesus and other high beings. Um, I've had people increase their business productivity and
Right.
profits, and that's always relative, right?
Yeah.
Depending on where
Of
they're at. So but what like one client who's quite successful already, but produced a high six-figure revenue webinar um, and did it with zero stress and had like a 50% close rate, and it was
right.
all due to our work together. So um, those are some of the basic results. But I'd say, in general, when people are able to unlock that intuition in a greater way and really realize their full creative potential, that
Right.
just gives them a greater zest and enthusiasm for life. And that's the ultimate goal of what my work
Right.
is all about.
Wonderful. So I've kind of run out of questions to ask you.
Okay.
Maybe you can share with us now a little bit of maybe there's a question that I didn't ask you that you thought I'd ask you, or
Yeah.
some information that you're hoping to share that didn't really come out in our dialogue.
Well, I think, one of the questions is like, what's the main guidance for people that they're looking for right now? And I think more than ever this time is all about being yourself because we're in a, post-COVID economy. The way we make money is going to more and more transform over the coming years.
Yeah.
A lot of the old systems and structures are being broken down and new ones are being rebuilt. So, how can you find your own creative expression and take the small steps every day to weave that into
Hmm.
your life rather than
Right.
feeling like you got to make some monumental shift or change, which can be
Right.
challenging, of course, just the
Right.
little things, right? Day to day. And then as you do that, it eventually amounts to the big things. But
Right.
beyond that, putting yourself in the right environment with the right people, like that's why I have my master class, Phoenix Rising master classes
Yeah.
every Sunday at 2
Yeah.
p.m. Eastern for people to engage in that. And I'm creating other bubble communities as well for people to monetize their talents at affordable rates in a way that's very
Right.
recurring and sustainable. So
Right.
these are some of the things that we really need to look at. But that African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So if we really look at how can we collaborate truly and
Yeah.
honestly with one another,
Absolutely.
that's the critical key.
It's a very important key, actually, collaboration and that coming together and recognizing who has what strengths and who who brings what to the table, and being able to just humbly accept the fact that, you know, you may have things that you need someone else to fulfill the void of, and just receiving that and moving forward with that. I mean, sometimes someone else can see what you can't see too. So having that somebody around to be able to be that person who fills that void for you is just amazing.
Absolutely, 1,000,000%. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, Matthew. Thank you for being with us. Maybe you can talk a little bit of how people get a hold of you and how they reach you if they want to, and then
Yeah.
we can let them know as well.
Absolutely. So the best way for people to find out about what I'm doing is to check out my masterclass, phoenixrisingmasterclass.com. They can check out the registration. It's free to attend for the general admission, and it's every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I'd be happy to walk them through my process and get to know them in that capacity.
That's amazing. All right, Matthew. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and it was a pleasure to have this dialogue with you today.
Thanks, Shiros.
Thank you.